Welcome to Positionality, a symposium on Latinx and Latin American art in Canada. And starting off the symposium today, we're joined by Salvador Lennox, who will be chairing the first session on the power of advocacy and collectivity. I would like to start the session off by acknowledging that the land on which their gallery is placed on is a traditional territory of many Indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject to the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Covenant Belt, an agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lakes region. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to have the opportunity as immigrants and settlers to this land to work and present here. We also realize that today we're all coming from different regions throughout Canada, perhaps even from Latin America or elsewhere. And this land acknowledgement only covers a small portion of unceded territories. I encourage you all to learn more about the land on which you are situated, the traditional ways of knowing and being prior to colonial impositions and genocidal practices. As a starting point, I recommend visiting native-land.ca. I'll add a link in the chat so you can get some more information on where you're situated. I will now pass it over to Salvador.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Thank you all for joining us in this first panel of Positionality. As Hannah said, this is the title of this panel is Power in Advocacy and Collectivity. And well, I'm very excited to have an amazing group of panelists for this session. First of all, I would like to thank Sur Gallery for the invitation, to Tamara Toledo, to Hannah Glazer, and for inviting us to discuss these topics. And well, just this panel has two parts. The first part is just a talk from the panelists about their work and how they see this specific topic, and then we will open to questions of all of you of the audience. As you can see, you cannot talk use your voice or your mic in this format, but you can write the questions on the chat, and I will read them and pass it to the panelists. Remember, I mean, I have to say this. I think that is almost, sometimes I feel that this is not necessary, but well, I have to say it. If everybody that participates, I'm gonna ask you to be respectful and constructive in the questions and in the comments. Just well, it's just kind of a housekeeping thing. Well, first for this panel, I would like to start with Cecilia Araneda. Let me give you a little bit of a bio of Cecilia. Cecilia is a Chilean-Canadian filmmaker and media art curator. Cecilia came to Canada as a child, as a refugee after her family escaped Chile's military dictatorship. She has a bachelor's degree from York University and a master's degree from the University of British Columbia. Her short films have been presented at film festivals and art museums around the world and have been recognized with a number of national and international awards and distinctions. From 2006 to 2017, Araneda served as executive director of the storied Winnipeg Film Group, the largest independent media art center on the prairies. In 2005, she co-founded the Winnipeg-based WNDX Festival of Moving Image. In 2015, she co-founded Mujer Artista, a group of Prairie-based Latin women artists. And in 2019, she became the first ever Prairie recipient of the National John Lowndes Award from the Canada Council of the Arts for her independent curatorial practice. Araneda has more recently completed her first feature film, Intersection, starring Carmen Aguirre, to be released this year. Okay, well, I leave you with Cecilia. Cecilia, welcome.
Thank you so much. I have a bit of a presentation that I'm going to do, so I'm going to just share my screen right now. This is me and my family when we first arrived in Winnipeg, and that's me falling. I'm mostly known as being an experimental filmmaker, but recently I did finish my first feature film. About Winnipeg itself, for you guys, that was a photo of like maybe a month ago. There's still a lot of snow out, but not that level. So Winnipeg is a small and isolated city, but it's an important one in Canada for being the largest urban center in between Toronto and Calgary. And so in spite of it having a population of only 750,000 people, it's relatively important to the arts in Canada just because of its location. Typically, the art world in Canada focuses only on what's happening in the geographic corridor between Toronto and Montreal. And so I did want to situate, where Winnipeg is, because it is far outside of that corridor. And sometimes there's less awareness of artists who live outside of that corridor. So Mujer Artista intervention. In 2014, the Canada Council opened up a small funding pot that was open to new initiatives within their equity funding portfolio, and it was called Cultivate. This triggered me to initiate some conversations with two artists who lived in Winnipeg at the time. So when that's me on the left, in the center is Colombian American interdisciplinary artist Brava Vilar, who now lives in the San Francisco area, and then Chilean Canadian ceramic artist Monica Mercedes Martinez, who now lives in Edmonton. Through these discussions, we landed on the idea of Mujer Artista, which would be a group focused on feminism within Latin Canadian arts, engaging in professional development, meaningful networking, art production, exhibition, and process-based auto-curation. So the starting process. After funding was secured, we had an open house for Latin artists through MAWA, Mentoring Artists for Women's Art, which is an artist-run center here in Winnipeg. And it was promoted through a number of arts communication channels. And through that process, we ended up with a group of 9 artists in the initial iteration. We secured a partnership with Ace Art, another artist-run center in Winnipeg that's focused on gallery space. And we would have our first ever show there a year after we started our process. Something that was a bit unexpected to me at the time when we were initially discussing and then having open houses in order to bring in people was that that dancers and performers came into the process, and that I hadn't anticipated that, and it resulted in something that was very interesting in terms of the process and really made it a much richer process beyond being focused on traditional visual art and perhaps media art crossovers. The first show that we did was called Speaking in Tongues. And while both Ace Art and MAWA did what they could to promote the show, we really had no idea who was going to show up. I wasn't strongly associated with either group, and I'm still not. I'm not associated with MAWA or Ace Art really that much. And so it would have to have been a new group, a new audience that would have been created for this. But the show was extremely successful and had a really strong run and had a lot of audiences throughout the entire exhibition. So here are a few photos of that exhibition. Some of these photos are like in progress while it's still being installed, and some of them are during the actual exhibition itself. After the first cycle, what ended up happening is that we intended it to be a one-time intervention, really. There was no funding mechanism at the time to enable it to continue to exist. In our original discussions, we just felt that it would be good to do it as a one-time initiative. If even it only existed for one exhibition, for example, then that would still be a meaningful outcome. The two other founders in the group also moved away from Winnipeg in the months prior to our first opening. And so if the group were to carry on, I would have to be working on it as at least the initial leader in a very solo manner. But after that, the Canada Council switched its funding model and we immediately became eligible for funding almost right away. It took me 3 times, so 2 rejections, but the 3rd time I did get the grant for the next process iteration. During that process iteration, I just leaned heavily on the model that we had already done. I didn't try to reinvent anything, except for this time we brought in 2 external mentors, which were Carmen Aide from Vancouver and Tamara Toledo from Toronto. The process itself was and remains very imperfect, fluid, loose, and sometimes a bit free range. But I've been following the mantra that even an imperfect process is better than no process at all. In this case, for the second show called Puesto Place, we had a similar mix of artists and a similar kinds of a process. So these are some of the works. This is one of my favorite pieces from that show, which is an arpillera, a Chilean story quilt, basically, that was done by Beatriz Barona. There were so many other processes, so many other of the works, which are just amazing. And it's really amazing to watch the different artistic processes. I'm cognizant as well in about the group being an imperfect process. I'm cognizant that the majority of the artists in the group, as it is today, would likely not ever apply for grants for their own art practice because the granting system is designed with intentionally placed obstacles. And so, I go through that mantra that even if it's imperfect, that it can still be meaningful. The group straddles the line between supporting artists who have at least some level of experience and those who are completely new to professional art practice. As a result, the group's outcomes are based on the journey of each individual artist, as opposed to having a predetermined baseline to function as a starting point. Cultural, political, and religious differences have factored into the group somewhat, and I'm very conscious of having to navigate that very carefully. So some of the process learnings, one of the things that maybe stood out to me more throughout these processes is just the understanding of who is a Latin Canadian person. There are, of course, other deeply important questions about Latin identity that are worth examining. But this notion of who is a Latin Canadian person is a more dominant question that spokes out of our group experience. For example, is somebody who has one Latin parent or who has minimal to no understanding of Spanish entitled to refer to themselves as a Latin Canadian? And if they're not, who are they if they're not Latin Canadian? Our group's working language is English because several of the people do not feel comfortable in Spanish at all. And it does raise an interesting philosophical question, in particular, for the understanding of Latin Canadian artists or people who grew up in Canada. The Canadian Latin art milieu is full of academics and practitioners who arrived in Canada as adults. And so this often foregrounds a very specific definition of the Latin Canadian experience onto the community. And so I'm not sure that there's a lot of dialogue, at least that I'm aware of. I don't live in Toronto, about other ways of being Latin. If there is a point where you stop being Latin Canadian, what is the role of a group like Mujer Artista to kind of bridge identity, especially for people who maybe have, for whatever circumstances, might not have really strong modern present day links to Latin America. What comes next? So we're just finishing up our third process, and we call each of these cycles. So we do a professional development cycle, and then that's about a year or a year and a half. And then we will do our next exhibit at the closing of cycle. So we're going to have our next exhibition opening in about a month on Friday, May 20th at Ace Art. And that's something that the group is very much working towards. Again, we had two mentors, Francie Duran, who's a Toronto-based media artist, and Alexandra Garrido, who's a Winnipeg-based dance performance artist. After this, from June 24th to 26th, we will be hosting a mini forum on subjects that have spoke out of our process learnings, and to have a discussion about the effect of this process on art practice and the larger Winnipeg art community in general. And after that, we'll do a strategic plan to find out what happens in the future. Does it continue, and how does it continue? And that's my presentation. Hopefully I made it in time.
Perfectly in time. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you very much. I think it was super interesting, and one of the things that I would like to just to leave there as a topic to be considered for discussion is how these interactions in the community, how they build the community, and how they establish like their own rules for interacting. For instance, this idea of including people from different disciplines and having like a really transdisciplinary action with performers and dancers together with the visual artists as something that is needed for the expression in general. I think it's something that could be discussed later in the questions. Thank you very much, Cecilia. It was super interesting. And also, it's, as I said to you before, it's I'm in Toronto, based in Toronto, and the rest of the panel is based in Toronto. And it's so refreshing to listen what's happening in the prairies, because Canada is so big that sometimes we don't communicate as efficiently as we should. But thank you, Cecilia. Our next panelist is Ana Barajas. Ana is born in Mexico. Ana holds a BFA from OCAD University in Sculpture and Installation. She received a master's degree in curatorial studies and a master's degree in modern art history from the University of Toronto. As the director of YYZ Artist Outlet, a non-for-profit artist-run center, Barajas has managed more than 100 exhibitions to date. Independent curatorial projects include It Takes Everyone to Know No One in 2011 at the Justina Varniger Gallery, the 19-hole Cuchifritos in 2014 at the Gallery and Project Space, New York, and the group exhibition Disappearing Act in 2017 at the Thames Art Gallery in Chatham, Kent. She's currently an advocacy and community consultant for the Art Gallery of Ontario. Ana, it's a honor to have you here, and thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, as the Lord said, Ana Barajas. I was born in Mexico City. I came to Canada when I was 15, so most of my life I've spent here in Ontario. I'm a second Toronto. I've been the director at YYZ for about 10 years, and I'm on location right now. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a tour and tell you how we work. Oops. I am going to flip the camera. So for those that are not familiar with Toronto, 401 Richmond, it's a building that used to be a tin factory, and it has been converted to studios or galleries. Still a commercial building, but so we pay commercial rent. But our landlords are very much interested in keeping the site as a cultural space. There's several galleries on the main floor and in the basement, most of them nonprofit like us. A couple of them are commercial galleries, but this area is a childcare center for folks that work in the area.
Sorry, Anna, sorry,
Yeah.
apparently there's a problem with the audio and your voice is very low. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, it's better. That's better. Thank you.
Okay. So as I was saying, the space is, it's a commercial space, but the landlords really want to keep the space into like a commercial, a cultural site. So this is our gallery. It's on the main floor. And the way we sort of approach advocacy, as Salvador was talking about, is having different entry points for artists to participate in our programming. We have about 12 shows a year, but we have, as I said, different entry points. So we have mural space for artists that are more sort of design-based or graffiti-based, or that work in this sort of medium, and we leave it up for a year so we can keep it up in the public area of the building for a year, and then we change it every September. This was by Cedar Eve. The little boxes here, they are lending library. We have a publication program, and we lend our books to the public free of charge. And we also have some public programming related to collecting, to writing, to reading communally as well. So anybody can participate on that project. Then we have a window space. Sometimes it's used by artists that have bigger solo shows in our spaces. But what we're trying to do with the window space is also give it access to emerging artists, artists that perhaps don't have like a large body of work, but they have one project that would fit the space. This is by Lana Yuan, who's called Education, and she just graduated from her MFA in Wealth, I believe. So it's one of our ways of supporting artists where they're at. And one of the things that really sort of helps me continue the work that I do is, and I don't think she'll mind me saying this, but she was really excited to have the opportunity to show at a time when she was just out of school and maybe not getting a lot of feedback for her work. And I really hope that this project kind of gave her a little bit more energy to continue making work and not give up altogether, because as we all know, it's very hard to continually make work and get rejected and not have a lot of exhibition opportunities. So as I said, we have a publishing program. We publish about a book a year. It is very expensive to publish print books. So, and all the work that goes into producing a book might take about 3 years in total, from getting the writers to produce the work and design and production. So it is a slow process, but we have that entry point. That seems to be more of a project for folks that are invested in academic work, or we do have some artist books, but it's just a different platform for us. And in terms of like assisting artists with the kinds of projects that they want to do, we've just recently supported the project of Josh Thorpe. He's a visual artist as well as a musician, and he has produced 2 records, and we assisted him with the production of his latest record. So not only books, but we're also producing records for some reason. Basically, it's our position is that if an artist comes to us with an idea and we can make it happen, we'll see how we can make it happen and support them in any way we can. This is Eva Colte, and there's different ways that we work, but most of it is we assign this 2 rooms that we have as solo exhibition space. For one, I think our artist fees kind of go a long way, better served one artist rather than a group, because we know the way the things are organized here in Canada. We pay CARFAC fees, which is an organization that supports the fair wages of artists, and they set an annual fee schedule for artists depending on how big the galleries are, what the budgets are, how many people are in an exhibition. So if we decided that we wanted to concentrate on solo shows, because at least, you know, the $2,000, a little bit more than $2,000 would go to one artist rather than divide them into many different folks participating in a group show. So the way we work also, we have an open call for submissions, and we don't ask artists to pitch a particular project, because we know that from the time the artists get selected to the time they actually exhibit could be, you know, 1-2 years ahead, and they might not be interested in showing what they initially pitched. So we give them flexibility to present whatever they want, however they want. If they're still interested in presenting what they pitched us, that's great. If it's evolved into a different project, that's also great. If they want to show something completely different, we support that. We've had people, you know, apply with performance work, and in the end, they show paintings because that's just where the work is taking them. So again, a way for us to support and be of service is to be flexible and to allow for artists' practices to grow and change and transform. Now with Eva, she finished this work in 2021, so it was pretty much ready to go. The invitation was for her to show this particular work. And I think that suited her practice at the time. I'll show you the work of Sarah, which is a completely different way of working. I'm just gonna walk over here. This is Sarah Pupo. She's based in Montreal at the moment. And what Sarah did, she just rolled into town with like a U-Haul full of totes of items that she's been creating for the past couple of years. She did a residency in Italy, and she created some of this work then. And she basically camped out at the gallery for a week and figure out how the work was gonna be presented in relationship to this space. I mean, she had this idea of creating this shelf and installing the shelf, but you know, the resulting effect of using it minimally was pretty much decided on site. Same with the pieces on the floor. She basically just asked us to purchase gypsum sheetrock that you use for walls, and the idea of cutting it into this sort of pathway, mimicking some of the terrain that she was working in Italy, just came organically as she was installing. Same with this hanging piece that, you know, after the fact we talked about it, and it looks like a ship, like sails of a ship. But everything kind of got produced in a week. Basically just up to her completely. And our role then is to assist her with the purchasing of the materials, assisting her with tech support, and just giving her the space and time for her to develop what she thinks suits her practice at the time. You know, it's an always evolving premise. What it forces us as an institution is to be open-minded, to be able to not care if it's successful or not, however people define that. If it works for the artist, if they grow, if they develop their practice, if some of the ideas that they've been playing with get actually transformed and made into physical exhibitions, then that's great. I think that's what we can do to support them. That's the best we can do with the resources that we have. As I said, we just meet them where they are and help them achieve their goals. We have different ways of working, as I said. So there's the exhibitions, there's the books, there's the multiples or records, or any kind of audio projects that they pitch us. We also have a residency program where artists can spend time in the space and create brand new works. We have what we call the Wawased Lab, which is a sort of a mentoring opportunity for emerging artists and new Canadians and refugee artists as well. And also we have what we call a retrospective or self-directed retrospective, because we find that even senior artists lack opportunities and spaces to show their work. And also we want them to have agency in how their work is exhibited. So self-directed retrospective, in a way, it's a way for them to look at their body of work and show it in a way that they feel suits their current practice. And it gives them an opportunity to show work when sometimes it's even hard for senior artists to show. Yeah, this is our center in a nutshell. I don't know if you want more, but I can answer questions afterwards.
Thank you very much, Anna. I think it was great. And one of the things that for me, they were very intriguing and attractive from what I said is the idea of the hub, and you explain it, but this idea of not necessarily centering everything into a gallery or into a specific form of connecting artists, but also like considering yourself a hub where the artists arrive and connect and produce, and you have like different outputs, no? And I think that's a very interesting and attractive idea, and so I hope we can discuss that further in the questions section. Okay, so thank you, Anna. Now we're gonna go with Nicole Cartier. Nicole Cartier Barrera is a Colombian-Canadian art critic, writer, and researcher of contemporary art and visual culture in Latin America. She inquires the construction of collective memory, the overlapping of in-person and online political and aesthetic gestures, and is invested in editorial processes within a curatorial framework. She has a bachelor's degree in visual arts and art history from Los Andes University in Bogotá, in Colombia. She's currently a candidate in the Master of Visual Studies program at the University of Toronto. And well, thank you for being here, Nicole. It's a pleasure to have you here in this panel.
Hi, Salvador. Thank you for the invitation. I have like a raspy voice today, so everyone, excuse me. Canadian weather isn't my thing. So first I wanted to say thank you to Sur Gallery for having me here. And I also wanted to acknowledge all of the institutions that have actually supported me in the last 2 years to produce the project I will be presenting today. My project, as you might imagine, has been supported by the University of Toronto, by the Daniels Faculty of Architecture, Landscape and Design. It has also been possible through the support of the Art Museum at the University of Toronto, the Risa Greenberg Curatorial Studies Award, through a Joseph Armand Bombardier Canada Graduate Scholarship. And it was also partially funded by the Latin American Studies Program Engagement Award. So I want to start by thanking all of them. And a little bit on the same page as Cecilia, I thought that since this is a positionality event, it might make sense to start saying something about myself and from where I'm actually speaking from. My mother is Colombian, my dad is Canadian, and I've been living my entire life in Bogotá. So my relationship to Canada has always been very distant. And just last year, I arrived here to Toronto, and it has been an interesting experience. So basically, I was planning on doing my master's program, and COVID hit. So in 2020, I decided to start this program online. So I met all of my cohort and my teachers through an online environment. And I would always feel like I was in this threshold of never actually being in Bogotá and never actually being in Toronto. Like I was always constantly leaving somewhere and arriving somewhere else without really having a place to be at. And through that first year of doing everything online, I started to wonder, what is it that bound us to a territory, to a community, and how is it that a lot of people are actually having this constant negotiation of identities, of languages, of contexts. And to me, this migratory experience has been very enlightening in so many ways. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen now. And this is gonna start being cheesy, so prepare for that. I hope you're all seeing it. So this project started out of the necessity of building community. During the last 2 years in Colombia, there have been a lot of waves of violence and protests happening around certain situations of extreme violence and human rights violations. And I started working around and with the help and support of people who were also troubled by this situation. And within a longer history of violence that occurs in Colombia, you kind of get this cyclical replacement of generations, where older generations, as my parents' generations, were somehow disenchanted of what was already happening, but younger generations meet in the streets and try to do something about it. But because of COVID, it was very difficult to actually meet people and to actually organize mass gatherings in the streets. So those last 2 years, I was drawn to a lot of people who were somehow trying to speak up, to call for action, to break a state of apathy in front of the violence that was occurring throughout the country, and that they were all somehow trying to do it in very different ways, most of them from spaces of like their own private spaces, their houses, their apartments, because it was very difficult to actually meet. So in these 2 years, we had like two very specific moments of social outbursts. We had one in September 2020. We were 3 days of riots, like basically menaced the stability of the country. And then 8 months later, in April 2021, a national strike was summoned, and the entire country was under the strike for almost 3 months. So this was like a very unstabilizing situation. And all I could think of was like how to transmit and how to mobilize despite the anxiety of the virus, of the police violence, of the fear of all of these threats, and how to actually encounter others and work productively despite and because of that anxiety. So this is the team of people I started working with. They composed an editorial project that is called Réplica Ediciones in Bogotá. And with them, we decided to do an editorial project that could gather some of these experiences, because at the beginning of the pandemic, okay, so that's how this project came to be. A guide for the afflicted and defiant, una guía para los afligidos y desobedientes, is a project about being absolutely depressed and anxious in the midst of social outburst and like trying to do something about it, and something that responds productively to that situation. So for instance, I'm an obsessive person, so I started like gathering and collecting images and gestures of people doing different things to respond to this situation of outrage. And these different gestures ended up composing a bigger and like a narrative of the conflict that went beyond my single perspective and my single position. So for this project, I brought together eight collaborators, as I call them, to work together in translating their experiences of the pandemic into an editorial product. So for instance, Ana Maria Montenegro in Bogotá used her house as her own private headquarters for protests. She projected messages of her window and organized concerts of resistance harangues and produced smoke signals and cries for help, all from her apartment. Rafael Diaz stamped banknotes with the information he wanted to keep in circulation, despite the restrictions of public spaces and digital platforms, for which he also created memes to make circulate information about police violence during the protests. Mestizo, a circus artist, helped organize a collective public intervention that draw over 13 kilometers of Bogotá streets the silhouettes of victims of extrajudicial killings. Dance collective La Otra Danza created sound collages that would gather voices from victims of violence into a single shout of indignation. Alejandro Montoya in Medellin produced road signs that asked very uncomfortable questions. For instance, where are the missing people? Putamente Poderosas is a civil rights organization also based in Medellin that put under the spotlight a population that had been abandoned by the state, that of sex workers, and promoted practices of care-based activism. And Tanya Tapia Jauregui, as a journalist, documented the protest and then reflected on the weight of the archive of violence that we all keep in our cell phones after the protest is over. So all of these gestures, these actions, they were all gathered in this project that every time I look at it, it feels bigger than the day before. So this project is about understanding the heavy-heartedness of affliction and seeing how it can actually become a mobilizing force, a force that brings people together and that doesn't undermine individual experiences of exposure to violence, but that tries to net a bigger thread through which individuals can support each other when the state fails at doing so. So the project is composed by 8 posters. Each of the posters was designed by one of the collaborators. And on the posters, with the team of Replica, what we did was translate their experiences into a set of instructions. So the posters can be like spread wherever people want to take them. And the project also contains a little book, a book of essays that I wrote and that explains these last 2 years through the perspective of these 8 collaborators. The project is also going to be available online through a webpage. I'm still working on the webpage, so you won't find anything there yet. The idea is that it can be accessed by anyone, anywhere, but that it can keep growing. Finally, the project is going to be shown at the Art Museum at the University of Toronto. It's going to be an exhibition. It's going to be, it's opening on May 11th. So for all of those who are in Toronto, you're more than welcome to join. It will be open through the entire summer. And through these 3 dimensions, like the exhibition, the webpage, and the print project, I was trying to think to respond to COVID and to the restrictions of traveling and the restriction on the mobility of bodies. Because as a curatorial student, I was expected in my program to produce an exhibition. And it was an exhibition in a country I had never lived in. So the question of how to bring my story to the other side of the continent and how to translate that story and those stories, because there's multiple stories, how to translate them to a Canadian audience was my biggest challenge, and also one of the biggest creative opportunities, because it gave me the chance to rethink what we understand as a curatorial practice. So I wanted to use the space to invite everyone to be familiarized with the project, which I think is big, but because it contains a lot of stories and it can potentially keep growing. So I'm very excited to be able to actually show it here. And yes, it will be real in a couple of days, and everyone's welcome to see it.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and we're really looking forward to see the exhibition, to see the project. I think it's spectacular. Actually, in the chat, there are like some expressions of this interest, and also, I mean, we will go through the list of artists. They're asking you for the name of the artists, of Ana María Montenegro, Rafael Díaz, Mestizo Tunyazo, Alejandro Montoya, La Otra Danza, Tania Tapia Jauregui, y Putamente Poderosas. No, that's
yeah, good.
So I think that that your work is super powerful. I think that this curatorial project is quite coherent and strong and interesting, and also your point of view on precisely on positionality, on your position. And I'm interested, and we will go into at the moment of the questions. We will go into this idea of what I call the parallax effect, which I really like. No, when you're, I mean, you talk about your background and with a Colombian mother, am I right, and a Canadian father, and then moving to Canada for doing your master's degree. How do you see Colombia from here, and then how do you see Canada? No, now that you're here, so that is something that we will talk more. I think is very powerful, and also the elements of direct interaction with the society, because these are not just pieces. These pieces have an activism tone and an activism element that I think is very powerful and something that we would like to discuss further. And our last panelist, and very honored to have her here, is Paola Gomez. Paola is a co-founder and director of Muse Arts. Muse Arts is for you that you're not here in Toronto, Muse Arts is a very important and prominent community arts and activism organization. I think it's really important, the reach that they have and the work that they perform. I think is amazing. Paola Gomez is a human rights lawyer, which I was surprised about. Paola, wow, the human rights lawyer, community organizer, public speaker, artist, facilitator, writer, and dreamer. A member of PEN Canada's Writers in Exile, which also I was surprised when I was reading it. It was great. Paola is involved in causes such as ending violence against women and forced migration. Her work integrates the arts, community engagement, and anti-oppressive frameworks. Paola is also the co-founder of Happening Multicultural Festival, where the works of newcomer, refugee, and immigrant artists from diverse backgrounds take center stage. Through Muse Arts, Paola has developed a cultural exchange in Latin America and the Caribbean, and a micro-grant program to support community arts in rural regions of her native Colombia. I just wanted to mention that Paola just came back from Colombia, that she just had a residence there. I think that the work is very interesting, so I'm gonna shut my mouth and I'm gonna leave it to you, Paola. So thank you for being here.
Salvador, thank you so much for the invitation. Thank you to Sur Gallery as well for creating and opening the space for this very important conversation. Again, my name is Paola Gomez, and for the interest of accessibility, I am going to inform my background. I have a white wall behind me with a picture of women holding hands. And on top of a dresser, I have a set of rag dolls holding hands as well. I am wearing a green dress with a yellow necklace with I have long, big brown earrings. I am a woman of color. I'm very pinkish right now, with round face, curly hair with a ponytail. I'm very grateful to be here. And as we talk of positionality, recognizing the positionality refers to identity, and identity is exploring the elements of power and privilege and power imbalances. I want to ground myself by saying that there is power, the power of the intention and the power of the impact. When we look at things from our intentions, we're looking at things from the perspective of someone with privilege. When we look at things from the perspective of the impact of the work that we do, we are evaluating, also recognizing that positionality. I'm going to do this presentation from a very personal perspective, recognizing that my reality does not represent the reality of those who are here, and that we may differ in ideas and views, yet we still can coexist and be in spaces as far as we are respectful of each other's experiences and views. So with that, I'm going to open, I'm gonna share the screen and start my presentation. And let me know if you are able to see my first slide right now. And I'm gonna ask my mom to stop because she's putting food for me. So this is my Latina mom taking care of me. Thank you. Muse Arts. Muse Arts really started as an act of resistance, particularly as when we started this, my partner and I, who had just arrived from Colombia, having over 20 years of experience as a visual artist, with, as a university professor in the arts, as a proponent of digital works in the coffee zone of Colombia. And in my case, after dealing with many years of post-traumatic stress disorder and dealing with with experience of loss that comes from the refugee experience, so we started knocking doors, trying to figure out how could we start our or retake our artistic practices. For him, from the visual arts perspective, and for me, through literary and textile art, which are the elements that are, or the art forms in which I navigate more comfortable, and I will say I'm more fluid. And what we found was quite sad. We found many gatekeepers. We also found many doors that were really closed, and in the other doors that were slightly open, we really felt that we were being invited more as a token, rather than as people that could have the knowledge and experience. So we also got really bothered by the fact that as newcomer or refugee artists, we were really seen as emerging artists, not giving value to the experience in the many years of work that we have done in the past. So we are of the idea that when a door closes, that's fine. We just go and build a new one. So this is how Muse Arts started as a collective. And so after 8 years, we are now an artist-run community arts organization where we showcase the works of newcomer, refugee, and immigrant artists, and we engage in processes of arts educations and community arts, focused mostly in social justice and oriented to community building and peace building, two very important elements for us as part of the work that we do. We felt that through the different things that we had to work on, it was important to create space for conversations with artists in the areas that were relevant, and when we talk about, again, anti-oppression, we need to be able to understand the language. We also need to be able to apply that language, particularly if one is interested in being a community engaged artist. So recognizing, from positionality to also the different layers of our identities and the impacts that those have. So yes, and it happens here in Canada that in many occasions we deal with the white savior complex. And yes, it does happen in the Latin American communities. So as we don't specifically focus only working in Latin American communities, we make sure that we promote a language that is inclusive, but also we open the spaces and the opportunities for artists to have access to that education and to that information, so they can decide to be and to do the work that they need to do. And in that sense, we also thought that was very important to discuss very important elements of settlement, particularly as we work with newcomer artists. And so this is how SMART's program started. Our work involves many different components, and from community arts, as I had mentioned, we go through the importance of using the space and the opportunities that we have to bring up some very important issues. In this case, I'm sharing some of the images of works that we have done with different groups, not only here in Toronto, but also in Latin America. In this case, these images that you're seeing are images of with a group in Medellin, where through cultural gatherings, conversations about peace take place, and that's where the music appears. We had also participated in El Carnaval del Diablo in Rio Sucio through a residency where we understand the importance of this carnival as a space of recollecting the realities of Colombia, and also community members being able to discuss very important issues of the reality that is taking place in Colombia. Have been extremely active in elements and issues that relate to Colombia, not only as a survivor of the war in Colombia, but as one who had to leave Colombia because of the type of work that I have done there. So it is extremely important that we continue changing the light to the realities in my native country. In that sense, and in that order, we also have a community arts residency in Colombia. We do have one in Cuba as well, but I'm referring here specifically to the work that we do in Colombia, bringing Canadian artists to Colombia to engage in exchange with local artists on concepts of peace building and community building. So what we create is a space for knowledge sharing, where we have an opportunity to learn from each other and then take back that experience and bring it to the communities where we work. So we are usually there for a period of 2 weeks. And so during those 2 weeks, it's a very intensive work. What we do, we work from 7 in the morning until 9 p.m. From knowledge sharing in training for the residents, to going into the communities and learning of the important processes that are taking place there. Most of the images that you're seeing right now are in the coffee area, where we actually have a space. This is the area that I am from, and I have been able to go back. So I go back now feeling more empowered and less fearful, and I feel extremely supported by the processes that we do there, as what we intend is to learn also from the resilience and power of community that takes place in many of the small towns of the coffee zone. I am from a very small town in the mountains of El Quindío, the smallest province. We call it department, but here it will be like province of Colombia. And it's just a beautiful space. I just want to, while I'm saying this, I want to share with you that we're going back at the end of November, and also in a month we're going to be raffling a full ticket, like a full spot from paying your airplane tickets to your entire stay in Colombia during the happening festival. So I'm going to share a little bit more of that later on. We do believe in the power of radical generosity. This is something that is extremely important to me, and we move the work that we do from a place of abundance. We believe that what happens is that we artists are told that we have to compete with each other because we live in spaces of a lot of precarity in terms of resources. So we have to compete and kind of like hide information from each other. And we believe in the fact that we have to open the spaces to knowledge sharing, to let people know that opportunities, grant opportunities and otherwise are available, and that when someone else receives that opportunity or that grant, we should celebrate in the same way as if we have received it, because it's the only way in which we actually going to be able to be a stronger force when we work and celebrate each other and when we lift each other up. So this is type of the work that we do in the community arts. I have a teacher complex. Yes, I am a college professor, but I have a teacher complex before that. And so this is something that is very, is in the bones of the community arts residency that we run. All is, before going into the residency, participants need to go through a process of anti-oppression training, which we pay for, because it is extremely important to recognize that when we go there, we are not going to go to a place that understands or have the same experience of what it is to be an artist here in Canada, or that our experiences had already been influenced by the multiple identities in lives that we are being touched with here in these spaces. So here I'm sharing an image of a project that is very important to me. This project is called The Doves of Peace, and I believe I have another image that will actually be also an invitation. So the images that you're seeing is part of our Dove Sewing Circle, and you have here images from Medellin, Colombia, in the center, where we were sewing the dove with mothers who had lost their kids to the war. In Colombia, we have here also an image of a group of protesters sewing the dove at the 24/7 cultural demonstration that we did outside of the CDC in May last year, and I was one of the organizers. And this is something that took place while there's still, the national strike in Colombia due to the police violence and the corruption that takes place in Colombia. So you have other images here you see here other images of us sewing the dove in other community events. And so it is not strange to see me on the street sewing this dove. So the concept is these little pieces of fabric represent the social fabric in these stories of each individual that makes part of this. I never see this as my work because it's not. I try to leave my artist ego aside to be able to recognize that this is the creation of many hands, and that is my responsibility to be a caretaker of this art piece, because these are the stories of many, and it should not be that one takes the stories of others for the purpose of advancing one's career or for the purpose of advancing or getting grants. And so I'm very, very outspoken in these elements. So the Dove of Peace project that I had mentioned is one that we started in 2018. As I mentioned, the interest in talking about peace building has been there for a very long time, and into particular interest for me during the peace accord process for Colombia. Of course, I was part of the yes, the sí to the peace accord. However, again, and due to positionality, there were many against, And so those who were against, particularly in Colombia, were pretty much those who had not received the impact of the war. And that was also the reality here in Canada. So our first work was an installation outside of the embassy where basically I was stopping every person that was gonna go in the embassy, letting them know that I knew that they were gonna go and cast their vote out of love for Colombia, and regardless of their, how they were gonna cast it, yes or not, that we were proud that they were there. And so we asked them to intervene a banner with yes and no. And it was a very interesting process because it became like this Instagrammable space. So that was kind of the first thing that took place. Then we participated at a march, at a protest due to the killing of social leaders in Colombia. And we brought the first dove there. So one of these doves, and this became then from that moment in October 2018, became a project where every person that I interacted with, I asked the question, what is peace to you? So at that point, this process became something that involved many people. Up to this day, we have 500 doves intervene on canvas, and we have about 300 that are intervene on Bristol board, where community members and artists intervene this, talking about or expressing, illustrating their ideals of peace. These doves had gone as far as Nigeria, Kenya, and Zimbabwe. So we have doves that are coming from these places. We now, and I always say that these doves have evolved. Now this is a digital component, and we are getting ready to launch this at New Blanche. We are having an exhibition of this project during that time. It's very important to also make reference to the fact that every single person working on the logistics, the digital and the artistic components of the bidimensional and digital exhibition of this work are newcomer artists to Canada. And this is extremely important to us because we believe that artists, newcomer artists and refugee artists should receive the value of the experience that they are transferring from our countries of origin, and not being simply considered emerging artists. Now, in that sense, we also believe in the agency of each artist deciding to do their work in the best way and in the way that they want. And for that process, we had engaged in different focus groups and advocacy groups that had bring as a result things such as having the Toronto Arts Council, creating the creating the newcomer and refugee engagement program, as well as the newcomer and refugee mentorship program. I was also part of the conversation with Canada Council for the Arts in the need of creating a space for emerging artists and newcomer artists not to be considered as simply emerging, but to take the experience of those newcomer artists as one that recognizes the back home experience as valid, to have that validation of being an artist and being able to access resources. So I'm here, I'm just showing off the doves because I'm very proud of them. I also want to probably mention that during this work of using the arts as as also a tool of advocacy, I had been fortunate to be able to travel to different places, being able to bring community arts to those spaces and in these conversations, from going to Luxor in Egypt to talk about the creation of art curriculums for kids, to going to Honduras and Mexico to meet the kids from the so-called Honduran caravan. We have been using arts as a way of bringing issues to light and to discuss the power imbalances of our society. And I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Paula. Yeah, thank you very much. The camera, sometimes I try to turn it on and it didn't work. It was very interesting, and one of the things that we discussed previously also with Nicole is this idea of the activism and the integration of the society, and how the cultural practitioners and arts organizations can have an impact, a direct impact on society. So so this is this is the time for the questions. I have some here. When you already have somebody interested in going to a residency in Colombia. I just saw the landscape, and I want to be there, especially now with this weather, which is kind of gray. You'll see the mountains. It sounds like a desirable place to be. One question. I would like to start the conversation with one question, and then I will go to the questions of the audience. It's about this idea of the position of you as cultural and art promoters and practitioners. How do you see yourselves in comparison to your countries of origin? I think that for Paola was very clear, because you mentioned all these things of back and forth with the residencies. But I don't know if Anna, for instance, I know that that she has a lot of relationship with Mexican artists, and she's always helping Latin American artists to settle and to connect in the community. But I don't know, how do you see, how can you deal with the political situation of your countries of origin living here, and then how this is connected to your own experience here as Canadians? I don't know who wants to start.
So that's a bit of a difficult question for me, because I grew up in Canada, and I grew up in Canada in an era that was largely pre-internet. And so, my parents would have been receiving magazines in the mail like a month after news happened. And, VHS tapes would somehow make it circulate. Somebody had a satellite feed, and somewhere VHS tapes would circulate around. For me personally, the community that I feel that I grew up with is actually the exile community here in Canada. So it is the Chilean exile community that became this extended family, not just in Canada, but quite frankly around the world, because wherever they landed, it becomes just like a door that's always open wherever you are. And that's one of the very interesting things about that community itself. And so the definition of me personally as being Chilean challenges what Chilean is. I am a citizen of Chile. I do vote. I do go back frequently, but my relationship has mostly with Chile tends to be a private relationship in regards to family. Over the years, I have developed some relationships with Mapuche Film Festival in particular, and I do workshops there, and I do exchanges there. I certainly was there like 3 times in the 5 years before the pandemic, and I will be going there again next year. So it becomes interesting, the notion of diaspora, but even in Canada, for example, when I talk about the relationship of political differences that we all have, right? We all know, maybe we're better at standing in the room and knowing that, yeah, these are some like really significant political differences, but we don't have to talk about them because that's not what we're in the room for. It's for the things that we're share in common about. But even within the Chilean community, for example, there is like a big, it's not cohesive. Certainly the exile community is, I consider that to be part of my family here in Canada, but I don't know that it's the entire Chilean community in Canada. So for me personally, that becomes, maybe it's a bit of an answer. I have used the resources that I have to support Mapuche women artists and filmmakers. It's a small act of solidarity, because I'm a small resource, just one person, when I can, but I don't view myself as a cultural connector, as doing the work of Chile. I actually see myself as doing the work of Latin Canadian, very specifically rooted around the geography of Canada. So that's kind of my art practice as a filmmaker is very much focused on the politics happening in Chile. And so maybe I can separate them out because I don't feel I have to replicate that a second time because I'm already doing that as an artist.
Yes. No, thank you. And I have a question because we're a bit tight in time, constrained with the time. So I'm going to ask for Anna. There's a question from the audience saying, in regards to your publications, have you published books of Latin American or Latinx artists?
Yeah, we haven't. We haven't yet. The opportunity hasn't really presented itself. I think over the years and because of issues tied to finance, the books that we publish seem to be tied to local collectives of artists and academics because they tend to be able to apply for grants and pay with those grants some of the writers' fees, etc. So a lot of it is tied to economics, but certainly we're open to the possibility of supporting the work of Latin artists in Canada and abroad as well. So if anybody in the audience has an idea or has a thought of something that they want to do, to hit me up. My email is on our website, and I'm always open to conversations for sure.
Just one thing that for the audience, I think I said that when we met for the first time as a group before this panel, I was telling that when I met Anna, almost the first thing that she said to me before saying, hi, my name is Ana, I'm Salvador, was she told me, how can I help you? And I think that that's exactly the spirit of Ana. She's always helping and connecting. She's a very generous person. And I think that in general, the YYZ also has this characteristic of helping and connecting, and as a hobby, I think it's an amazing organization, and Ana is a fantastic person as well. Good. So now for Cecilia, there's another question. I'm wondering whether you have been challenged in Winnipeg by the fact that you are exhibiting your own work within your own curated exhibition. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, well, the thing is, you have to understand the way that the group is. So the kind of standards in general for curatorial practice is or even programming practices, not just curators, but programmers also, is if you're engaged in a process of exclusion, then you should not be involved in that. But Mujer Artista is open for everybody. So there's never a process of exclusion. So it's more more like a member-based process. We've never excluded anybody, so anybody can come in. And although it falls in the realm of my curatorial practice, it's not something that I like. It's not on my it's not the shows that I put on my resume, just because it is more member focused. What I am able to use is my curator standing to get partnerships with these organizations and to get funding. The group is not an organization or an institution. It is funded through grants that I receive myself personally, and that is a function of how it had to work originally. And as we're going forward in strategic planning in a couple of months, I expect that that will change, but somebody has to then you become an administrative entity, then that becomes a thing, right? A thing to manage. But yeah, so the short answer is there's no exclusion process. There's no process of selection, and that's the key criteria that's used for not programming your own work.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. There are some other comments. Adela G asked Nicole the name of the artists of the exhibition. I mean, I mentioned some of them, but I don't know if through Sur Gallery or you can connect and have the names of these artists. The same Pamela Dodd says it was wonderful. This is to Nicole. And then Ivani, very interesting. Thanks for showing to the world the Colombian situation. And Chiara from Italy. Chiara, how are you? Very insightful. And Julian Gomez loves it. And then there's another one. Margie Rowan, thanks Cecilia, Anna, Nicole, and Paola for sharing your stories, empowerment, and profound care for each specific community. And thanks to Sur Gallery. Now, Nuria, who's going to be moderating, she's going to be the chair of another panel. It says the collective experience that we just saw are really interesting, and they're positioned from different perspectives, artistic perspectives. And so she's like summarizing, but there's a question for all of them, and I'll try to summarize it. She's asking, what's the impact of the pandemic in the well, this is almost for another panel of another hour and a half. But can you just summarize what if there was an impact of the pandemic on what you've been doing specifically with the community and the way you're interacting with the community of artists? I don't know if
I can say quickly.
Yes.
For us, an organization, I think we're, as much as we complained about the granting system in Canada, we are definitely blessed that we do receive operations and that we've been able to keep the doors open during the pandemic. And so at least, the basic necessities are paid for. I think the impact really is in the artist's time and practice, because a lot of the scheduled exhibitions had to be postponed, or and that I would imagine takes a toll on somebody who's creating for a living, because they're in a bit of a limbo, right? They don't know when that exhibition will occur, if at all. And also artists are depending on that artist fee to come through as income as well. So as an organization, we haven't felt the effects that much, but I do feel for the artists that were programmed in advance and then had to reschedule or had to wait it out, not just in their economics, but also in their own thinking and developing of the work, right? It kind of gets dulled a little bit. So that's been the effect for us.
Yes, Paola,
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so I do agree on the aspect of the precarity. I think it was even more evident, the precarity of employment and resources for artists. Was definitely clear that we were not in the same boat. The realities for artists with status in Canada were were, miles different from the realities of artists with precarious status in Canada, because we have many of them with the status of refugee claimants to international students to non-status. So big gaps, big difference, again, power and privilege. The other part that was very evident is that artists very generously came to the front and make sure to be there for when everybody needed to be in lockdown. So artists not only made and make revolution irresistible, but also make sure that communities were able to continue, being at home safe while taking the load of, creating music, creating programming, learning how to use the online platforms for many of us as something totally new. So, and yet we were there. I think the other part was that this myth of the starving artist was replicated in many ways, romanticizing the idea that to be an artist, we have to always be in sacrifice and a loss. And that's something that I want to challenge. And I want to challenge for all of us here right now. And is that if change needs to happen, we also need to move from romanticizing the sacrifices that we have to do in order to be doing what we love to do. And that is also a job. Thank you.
I fully agree, Paola. And I'm always making a joke with my wife that she's an artist as well. And she's was saying, remember that artists and geniuses suffer a lot. So it's like that, almost like, which is, it shouldn't be the case. No, should be, it's a way of, it's a way of living, and and it should deserve like a good life, and to live from the work. I don't know. I would like to. We're already out of time. We're 5 minutes after the time. I would like just to thank you all for being here. It was amazing. I learned a lot, and there were a lot of findings in this discussion, like the positions of resistance, the perspective of the diaspora, the idea of being away and then going back, and the idea of community and getting everybody together, working in a space. And I think it was amazing. I really appreciate and thank you for the work that you've been doing. Thank you very much. It's been really enriching and great. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias. And gracias, Hannah. Gracias. Gracias a todos. Thank you.
Of course. I want to echo what Salvador just said. Thank you all very much for being here. I love that it's a panel of women who are showcasing their work, and it's a whole other level of community coming together on that end. So I would also like to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors and our partners, the Canada Council for the Arts, Ontario Arts Council, Toronto Arts Council, the City of Toronto through Section 37, Hemispheric Encounters, York University School of the Arts, Media Performance and Design, Performance Studies Canada, Department of Visual Arts, Western University, York University's Graduate Student Association, the Power Plant, Vancouver Latin American Cultural Center, Institute for Creative Exchange, VTAPE, Mujer Artista, and SBC Contemporary Gallery of Contemporary Art. We'll be back this evening at 7 p.m. with our keynote speaker, Kenzie Cornejo, for her lecture Against a War on Mobility, Central American Art on Migration and Diaspora. For more information on this session later today and additional programming, please visit surgalleryvirtual.ca. And I will also like to take a quick moment to let everyone know that Sur Gallery will be having an upcoming exhibition called The Color Woman, curated by Tamara Toledo, which is opening at Sur Gallery on Thursday, May 5th. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today, and hopefully see some of you later. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.